All right, welcome everyone. So the people who are in the attendee list, which I cannot see, you can introduce yourselves briefly.
I'm Nick. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah,
just
CFEngine.
I'm Cody, and I'm also a regular here.
I am Craig. I'm a CF engineer, as they say sometimes. Digger. They dig into things. Okay.
All right. So my name is Herman. I am the product manager for CFEngine, and I'm here today to talk about custom promise types. And I think we can go ahead and open up a browser first, maybe. So custom promise types are relatively new in CFEngine. They are a way for you to implement new promise types that are not in the core binaries that we ship. So you can manage new types of resources or extend the functionality of the agent. So for example, we can see here on our build website, which is where we have different modules. We can look at what promise types exist here. So far, there are 5. There is one for running Ansible playbooks, one for managing Git repos, one for managing local user groups, HTTP requests, and systemd services. So that should give you an idea of the things that you can kind of add using custom promise types. For example, if we take a look at this one, it has some example here. So when you're using this module, you can use the Git promise type, and this has some attributes. So in this case, it's used to clone the starter pack repo and at this path and the master version, so that's the branch, and then this will keep that Git clone up to date every time CFEngine runs. Another thing you can do with custom promise types that hasn't really been explored much yet is to make new iterations, or if you feel like some of the built-in promise types maybe should have worked in a different way, or you want to have your kind of implementation of it, you can do that as well. So for example, today we're gonna make something that is kind of similar to reports promises, but works a little bit differently. So that's also quite useful. Any questions before we start looking at some code? Nick, you can interrupt me while I'm presenting here.
I hope I will.
Okay. So I have this project set up already. Right now, it's just an empty bundle. I thought we'd start with some policy, and then we can move on to the implementation of the module. So here I have a bundle, and just to make sure, let's just print something. So my test alerting system bundle is running. Let's just make sure that I have everything working, and let's run this. I hope this terminal is not too bad. So I'm gonna deploy that. And run that, and that's great. It says my test alerting system bundle is running, so we know that now we can start working on what we want here. So essentially what we're going to do is have some kind of condition, and we're using classes for that. So let's call this things went wrong. And it doesn't really matter what the condition here, but let's make it simple and do file exists var CFEngine red alert or something like that. So we have some condition that was met, and then we want to alert on that problem. If we're using a report promise, we could just do it like this. Things went wrong. And then there was an error mail server, for example. So that will print it to the terminal, but that's not so useful. Maybe we want to do multiple things. Maybe we want to log it to a file or send it to a server somewhere. So the other option we have is commands promises. And with commands promises, we could make our own script. And it would look very similar. Obviously, the promiser here would be some script. And then we would send our message as an argument. So let's do that. And that's kind of the same thing, but obviously in this script, we could extend it to do more things, such as make HTTP requests with curl, or log to file or databases or anything like that. At this point, though, we're limited kind of by the syntax here, and we would have to send whatever information we want in here as arguments, or maybe render it into a file. And it looks a bit unnatural to use commands promises. So what we can do is make a custom promise type instead. I'm going to call this alerting system. Same structure, we use the class guard. So if something went wrong, we want to print a message, and maybe it's just like that. But now, if we want to send some arguments, we could send, let's say, component and mail server. Maybe we want to have a severity, and that can be critical or error. So now we have a bit more flexibility with the language here. We can have attributes, they can have default values, they are named, so it's easy to see what is what. And then still we're implementing something in a script or in a Python module that's going to do the actual work. All right. Any questions before we move on to the code?
How come your alerting system isn't highlighted there?
Good question. It's because the author of this plugin for Atom hasn't updated it with a new regex, I think. I think the author is currently me, or the maintainer, so it's on me.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was thinking it was you.
Yeah. So I'm gonna remove some of the things that we just showed so that we are down to the bare minimum. So this is our structure. Things went wrong. There is a message, a component, and a severity. All right. And then we're going to implement a promise type for this. So this is kind of the skeleton that that implements a promise type. It uses our library, CFEngine, and it has some types for promise module, validation error, result. So we import those. And then to implement a promise type, you have to implement these two methods, validate and evaluate. So validate should just check if there are some kind of syntax errors or semantic errors with the data, and then evaluate should actually make the changes to the system.
So what kind of information can you validate here? Like that's coming into the promise?
It works on a fully resolved promise. So it gets essentially the same data as the evaluate will get. So you can validate everything. You don't have to check whether it's needs to be resolved or starts with dollar or anything like that. So you evaluate here, I'm doing the promiser, and then we can say if, what was severity? No, let's do the other one, component. If component not in attributes, raise validation error, missing required attribute component. So it's a validation step that runs before evaluate, and we can check whether attributes exist. We can check their values. We can check the value of the promiser, and so on.
Can we look into like the stock attributes, like comment and stuff like that? Like the common promise attributes.
Most of the common stuff like meta or if or things like that, they are not sent to the module at all. Okay. So they are handled by the agent and you don't have to do anything about them. We can look quickly at the docs here. So if we go to reference, promise types, custom, there is a list here of the things that are handled by the agent and the things that are reserved keywords, so you can't use them.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So we can check if this worked. So now we're checking if component is not in attributes. So let's remove that. And deploy our policy again. And run it. Okay. Did I forget to save? I can't see now with this Zoom overlay. Yeah, I did forget to save the Python module. So let's do that. One more time. So we still get that report, and then it says missing required attribute component for alerting system promise with promiser, blah, blah, blah. So it's printed multiple times because our promise is evaluated multiple times, but we do see that it is recognizing that this component, this error message that we added is missing. So let's add that back in. And let's get started on logging this. So now we should be good to log this. We can use CFEngine's log levels. So if we want to log something in info, we can do that. Self log info, and then let's do, let's log the promiser, and then maybe dash and the component, and then a dash and the severity. So let's set up those. Component is just attributes component. So now that we have checked here in the validation that component is present, then there is a guarantee that validation happens first and we don't have to check that again. But severity is optional, so let's account for that not being always available. So we can do attributes, get severity, and then if it's not there, we can do unknown. So then we have the promiser, and we can give that a name as well. So let's call it message promiser, and then this will be the message. All right. So I'm deploying that again, and let's run it. All right, so it does print our error message and the component and the severity, just like we expect. It prints it many times because it's evaluated many times. And this is something important to note, is that we should be checking whether we need to do something or not. We should only log once. So let's get into that. I'm gonna define a new method called log message, and what we're gonna do now is say that message equals this thing that we logged before. And then let's do did log equals self.log message. And then if did log, so if we logged something, we're gonna return a different result, repaired. Yeah, so that means that we did something, we made a change to the system, and we use the repaired result for that. Otherwise, we detected that we already had logged it before, so we're going to use kept for that. And now we just need to implement this. So let's create a log file. I'm going to call it alerting log. And let's just make sure that it exists always. So if not OS path exists, log file, you can just touch it. And then let's check if our log message is already in that file. So we'll do with open log file read as f. If message in f.read, return false, because we didn't log anything. It was already there. And then finally, now that we know that we haven't logged this already, it's a new log message, Let's open it again and append to it. So file write message plus new line. And we can also log it to the terminal. So log info message. And then we should return true because we did log something. Any questions here?
So if I understand this right, this the way this is implemented right now, when the agent comes along and runs that promise, it'll log the message into the file, and then you should have a promise repaired. And then if you run the agent again and make no changes on your system, then you should have a promise kept because that log message is already in the file.
Yep.
Is that right? So then what happens if I want a message in that file each time the agent runs? Even though it's the same message, it's like, now is different.
Yeah. So then one way or another, we want to probably add some timestamp to this message so that we can still have unique lines in this alerting log file, but a part of that unique line is a timestamp of when this happened. So the code would be here identical. Here we would include maybe a timestamp at the beginning, and then that would be the thing that we check for as well.
Oh, all right. Thanks.
Would it
Yeah, I really like
more
how.
sense-
Oh, go ahead.
would it make more sense in the log function to return the promise dot caps not kept whatever? Because you probably have more than actually two states of success or of
So you mean
that you,
like
that you
this?
did repair it or that you kept it, because you could also have an error like you couldn't touch the file because the file system was full, or you couldn't append to it because the file system was full. I know
Yeah.
you didn't,
So you
add
mean
in
like
flags
this,
and
and
stuff.
then we can do just
return that, yeah.
return this.
Mhm.
Yeah, that'll work. And then we can, for example, check again here. So if that file still doesn't exist, then probably something is wrong. So that would be not kept. And in that case, this is going to be hard for me to test, but
Right.
we could log an error and say like failed to create log file. Yeah,
You
that
make
would work.
if the file doesn't exist, I guess you could make the directory immutable.
Or you could just make a directory that's random and then not have it be there, right? Because touch doesn't create directories.
Well, how about I just simulate it? What if I do this
There you go.
and then delete the file?
Yeah.
So this wasn't a part of the demo, but let's try. So let's deploy that. And now this file should exist. It's there. If I run the agent, message is not defined. So that's a Python thing. It's probably just a, yeah, triple S. Did I do that in more places? No, that looks like it. That was just a programming error for me. So now it's running and it looks like it's doing nothing because everything has been logged before. But if we delete this file and then run it again, we get the error, failed to create log file. It's trying many times, but the code for creating that log file is missing.
Cool.
All right. Let's just fix this by deploying the fixed version. So now, as part of deploying, I am running the agent. So the agent should do nothing now. But if we look at the var CFEngine alerting log, we see that it already has the message. And if we rm that file and then run the agent, then it is logged to the terminal and also to that file. So now we have the promise that behaves more like what we wanted. It doesn't have this evaluating 5 or 6 times problem, because we are actually checking whether we need to make a change or not. Now we could also expand here to use curl or requests and hit an API as well. I don't know how we are on time, or if there are any questions here. It's a good place.
I have another question.
Yep.
So you can return multiple promise type, like you can keep and repair a promise at the same time, right?
Not with custom promise types.
Okay.
There is like a special rule about that they have to, for each evaluation, like for each expanded promise, it only has one result.
Okay, so you can't add or them together or something like that. They're not like bitwise.
No. So
Okay.
yeah, so it's explained in the documentation what you should do, and that's if something failed, like if something was not kept, then it should be not kept. If everything was already the way it should be, then it should be kept. And if you did make changes and it's now good, then it should be repaired.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so that is a difference between the built-in promises and the custom promise types. Nick, did you have anything?
I burned some questions that I had already, interrupted you.
Right. So something we could do that would be quite easy at this point is to use this severity. And this actually highlights a feature of promise types that you can't do in commands promises, which is we could have this severity control the log level. So if you see in the terminal here, you see that this log message is emitted by the agent with the standard logging that we have. So this is an info log message, but the content of it comes from our module. This is different from a reports promise where it starts with an R and it's using the reports promise code. So what we can do now is go here, and if we want our module to not always use info, we can have the log level. So let's say level equals let's just do it here. Level is info, perhaps, and then there's multiple ways to do this, but there is also an internal method called _log, and that has the level and the message. That's the same as log info. Now we just need to pass in the severity. So here, let's it's a good way to do this. We can make it so info if severity is unknown, else severity. All right, so we will still show the same severity or unknown here, but for the log level, we're going to default to info. Otherwise, we're going to use the severity as the log level. So in our code, we have severity error for this. And if we go back here, deploy this new version, I'm just going to use the same line where we delete the file and then run the agent. And now this is an error log message. So that means that both it's showing up in all the places where CFEngine logs show up. It has the same formatting as CFEngine logging, and it respects the log level that you give from the command line. So I've been giving -I all this time to show info, but now this is an error and it's still showing up. If we go back to info, it wouldn't show up in error.
And what happens if you feed it invalid log level? Just curious.
It will give us some error message. So we could check that. Let's go ahead and add some validation for that as well. So if severity in attributes that's not an error on itself, but we can do and attributes severity not in, and then we can define the ones that we want to support. So let's say info error. Those are the only options for now. Raise validation error, invalid severity plus attributes severity. And then let's change here to blah. Let's try that. Invalid severity blah. And then it has added automatic information here at the end with the line number and stuff, so you can see exactly where the problem is. It's this promise.
Nice. Cool.
Cody, did we have 30 minutes or how? When does this end?
Yeah. So technically it's 30 minutes, but we typically go over a little bit. So if anybody has to leave, we are recording this session and we'll upload it to YouTube at some point later today. But yeah, you can continue on.
Okay. If you would like to try this yourself or work off of this starting point, it's here in GitHub, CFEngine/example promise type alerting system. This is a project that you can just clone, and what I'm doing here is just running CFBS build and CF remote deploy to deploy it to my hub. One last thing that we could do that maybe is a bit more interesting is I have a server running here that is accepting post requests. Let's just do that. And then, yeah. So with this server running, we should be able to post the log message there as well. We can do that from here. I have imported requests already. So it should just be requests.post. And then URL is 127.0.0.1.5000. And the data, something like this, I assume. String of message, something like that.
There was an error in the mail server.
Yeah, so yeah, it already happened as part of the deploy. And actually, if I run it again now with RM, it will happen again. And I guess we should be able to open this here, 5,000. Yeah, so it's happened twice now. This server has received 2 identical posts. Yeah, we can do it again. And there's a third one. And we can change the policy, or we can add another error, perhaps. Let's just change some things here. Let's run that again. So this time there is only error in the file server because we haven't deleted that log. So now only the file server message was posted. So yeah, if you're familiar with Python, this is quite easy to do. The main thing to be aware of or to think about is how to make idempotent promises. So promises that don't keep making the same thing over and over again. And I think that concludes our demo for today. It's open for questions.
So we also have a bash library available for custom promise types. But it's further limited because it's a line-based protocol instead of a JSON protocol.
Yeah. So there is this library here. If you want to make promise types in bash, they support most of the things we've seen today, but it's kind of difficult to handle JSON. So anything more advanced with handling JSON is not supported. The main one that we show off is in Python. So that's this one. And it's not that difficult to implement or to change this. It's about 500 lines of Python. It's quite straightforward. We go back to the docs. Here is here's the docs, and if you scroll down here, there's some examples, and then if you actually want to implement this in Perl or some other language, you could do that as well. Here is everything you need to implement. So these are the requests that you receive on standard input. And then these are the responses that you have to send to standard output in your module.
Cool. think you hit all the questions that I had.
Okay. I can't see the camera or the chat or anything, so I'm not sure, but I'm assuming that you're reading any questions that show up.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that, Ula. And yeah, like I said previously, we'll post this on our YouTube site here in the next probably couple hours. But I'll go ahead and shut off the recording. So thanks everybody for joining us here today.